A single lie buried in a mountain of truth can destroy everything. That is exactly what happened on a foggy November night in 1936 when Hercule Poirot received a telegram that should never have been sent. Grab a steaming cup of tea or coffee, settle into your favorite chair, and let's dive into this forgotten case together. If you're enjoying these twisted Poirot tales already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because your support truly means the world to us and keeps these stories coming. And while you're there, drop a quick comment telling us from which corner of the globe you're watching tonight. Chapter 1. The Telegram That Lied. The year was 1936, and the world still remembered the Great War as a fresh scar. Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian with the magnificent mustache, had retired to the quiet village of King's Abbot, hoping to tend his vegetable marrows in peace. But peace, as Poirot often said, is the one thing murderers refuse to grant him. On the evening of November 12th, the rain hammered against the windows of his small cottage like impatient fingers. Poirot sat by the fire, wrapped in a thick dressing gown, reading a treatise on the psychology of deception, when the doorbell rang, sharp and urgent. His faithful valet George opened the door and returned holding a yellow telegram envelope. Poirot raised his eyebrow. "Telegrams after 9 o'clock, mon ami. They never bring good news." He slit the envelope with his silver letter opener and unfolded the single sheet. The message was brief, typed in capital letters. "Arriving midnight. Stop. Urgent matter of life and death. Stop. Do not tell police. Stop. Come alone to Stonegates Manor. Stop. Your old friend, Roger Ackroyd." Poirot froze. His teacup paused halfway to his lips. Roger Ackroyd had been stabbed to death 11 years earlier. Poirot himself had solved that murder. The man was buried in the village churchyard, not 3 miles away. Yet here was a telegram, signed with Ackroyd's name, dated today, and asking Poirot to come alone. George cleared his throat. "Is everything all right, sir?" Poirot folded the paper slowly. "No, George. Everything is very far from all right. Someone has just sent me a message from a dead man, and dead men, as we both know, do not send telegrams." He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked darkness. The famous little gray cells began to stir like bees in a shaken hive. First, the practical questions. Who knew enough about that old case to use Roger Ackroyd's name? Who wanted Poirot at Stonegates Manor, the very house where Ackroyd had died all those years ago? And why tonight of all nights? Poirot turned back to George. "Pack my small overnight case and telephone for a taxi. We are going to a house where murder once walked, and it seems murder has decided to walk again." Half an hour later, the taxi splashed through flooded country lanes toward Stonegates Manor. The house had stood empty since the tragedy, sold and resold, but never lived in. Local children called it the Cursed House and refused to pass its gates after dark. As the taxi turned into the long, overgrown drive, the headlights swept across rusted iron gates hanging open. Beyond them, the manor loomed black against the stormy sky, every window dark except one. A single light glowed on the first floor, the exact room where Roger Ackroyd had been found stabbed, in his study. Poirot felt the old familiar tingle along his spine. Someone was waiting for him inside. Someone who knew he would come the moment he saw that impossible name. The taxi stopped. Poirot paid the driver and stepped out into the pouring rain, clutching his umbrella like a sword. He walked slowly up the cracked stone path, his patent leather shoes squelching in the puddles. When he reached the front door, it stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open with one gloved finger.
Inside, the entrance hall was exactly as he remembered it. The same faded Persian rugs, the same grandfather clock, now stopped forever at 25 minutes past 9, the precise time Roger Ackroyd had died. But something was different. On the marble table in the center of the hall lay a single red rose, freshly cut, its petals still wet with rain. Poirot approached carefully. Pinned to the rose with a long hat-pin was a small card. On it, written in the same typed capitals as the telegram, "Welcome back, Poirot. The game begins where it ended. Find the truth buried in my lie, or die trying." Poirot picked up the card and turned it over. On the back, someone had drawn a tiny, perfect mustache exactly like his own. For the first time in many years, Hercule Poirot felt something very close to fear. Not of death. He had faced death many times, but of what this meant. Someone had studied him. Someone knew his habits, his pride, his insatiable curiosity. Someone had lured him here with the one bait he could never resist, a puzzle wrapped in an impossibility. He looked up the grand staircase toward the light burning in the study. "Very well," he murmured to the empty house. "You have your little joke. Now let us see who laughs last." With measured steps, Hercule Poirot began to climb the stairs toward the room where Roger Ackroyd had died, toward the light, toward whatever waited for him in the place where a murder had once been solved, but perhaps not as completely as he had believed.
Chapter 2. The Study Where Time Stopped. Poirot paused on the threshold of the familiar room and felt the years fall away. The heavy oak door stood open, a finger of yellow lamplight spilling across the threadbare Turkish carpet like blood from a fresh wound. He stepped inside, and the scent hit him first. Beeswax, pipe tobacco, and something metallic underneath. Exactly as it had been on that night 11 years ago when Roger Ackroyd sat at this very desk with a dagger in his heart. Nothing had changed. The same leather armchair faced the fireplace, though the fire was long dead. The same silver dictaphone rested on the side table, covered in a fine layer of dust. The same blue envelope lay half-burned in the grate, the one that had held the name of the murderer. Even the dagger, the actual dagger, had been returned to its place on the wall after the trial, as though the house itself refused to let the past rest. Poirot moved with the silence of a cat, his eyes taking in every detail. Someone had been living here. A crystal tumbler holding 2 fingers of whiskey stood on the blotter beside a fresh box of Turkish cigarettes, the same brand Ackroyd once favored. An overcoat hung on the back of the chair, still damp from the rain. And on the desk blotter, directly beneath the green-shaded lamp, lay a single sheet of heavy cream paper, folded once. Poirot approached. The paper bore his name written in elegant black ink, Hercule Poirot, Esquire. He unfolded it with deliberate care. "My dear Poirot, you solved my murder once, but you never found the truth. Tonight I offer you the chance to correct that failure. Everything you believed was a lie, carefully planted for your brilliant mind to discover. The real killer walked free. The real motive was never money, nor jealousy, nor blackmail. It was something far older and far crueler. Follow the trail I have left, and you will see. Begin with the woman who loved me enough to damn us both. She is closer than you think, and she has waited 11 long years for you to return. Yours in death, as in life, Roger Ackroyd." Poirot read the letter twice, then a third time aloud, his voice soft in the empty room.
The handwriting was perfect, an exact copy of Ackroyd's sloping, confident script. He had seen enough samples during the original investigation to know this was no crude forgery. Someone had practiced for years to achieve this precision. He slipped the letter into his pocket and began a systematic search. First, the desk drawers. Locked. He produced his small ring of picks and had them open in moments. Inside the center drawer lay a photograph he had never seen before. Roger Ackroyd, younger, smiling, standing arm in arm with a dark-haired woman whose face had been carefully scratched out with something sharp. On the back, someone had written in the same black ink, "She told the lie that killed me. Find her before she finishes what she started." Poirot read the photograph over and over in his gloved hands. The woman's figure was unmistakable, tall, graceful, with the kind of posture that spoke of breeding. But the face was gone, destroyed with furious precision. Only one person would mutilate a photograph this way, the person in it. A floorboard creaked behind him. Poirot did not turn. He had heard that particular creak before, on his first visit to this house. It was the board just outside the secret panel that led to the old servant's staircase. Someone had been watching him from the hidden passage. He spoke to the apparently empty room, his voice calm and conversational. "You have gone to considerable trouble, mon ami. The telegram, the rose, the letter, the photograph. Almost artistic. But you made one small mistake. You used my name on the envelope, in the English fashion. Roger Ackroyd knew I was Belgian. He always addressed me as Monsieur Hercule Poirot, never Esquire. That little word tells me you are not who you pretend to be. Now come out and let us talk like civilized people. Or must I fetch you myself?" Silence. Then the softest laugh, feminine, low, and familiar. A section of the oak paneling swung inward, and a woman stepped into the room. She wore a black evening gown that once was expensive, now 11 years out of fashion. A single diamond brooch glittered at her throat. Her hair, once raven, was now threaded with silver, but the eyes, those extraordinary violet eyes, were exactly as Poirot remembered. Mrs. Ferrars. He inclined his head with perfect courtesy. "Or should I say, Caroline Shepherd? Your brother always did say you had a talent for drama." The woman who had poisoned her husband and driven Roger Ackroyd to suicide smiled without warmth. "You always were too clever, Hercule Poirot. 11 years I waited for this night. 11 years living with what we did. But tonight the lie ends, and the truth will kill us both, if necessary." She raised her right hand. In it she held the same dagger that had killed Roger Ackroyd, its blade catching the lamplight like a promise. Poirot regarded her calmly. "You summoned me here to confess." "No," her voice was steady. "You summoned me here to die, just like he did. Only this time there will be no clever little Belgian to save you."
Chapter 3. The Confession That Wasn't. The dagger trembled in her hand, but her violet eyes never left his. Poirot did not step back. He simply adjusted the perfect crease of his trousers and sat in the same leather armchair where Roger Ackroyd had taken his last breath. He crossed his legs, placed his grey suede gloves neatly on his knee, and regarded the woman as calmly as if they were taking tea at Claridge's. "Please, madame, lower the weapon. It is most distracting, and that dagger has already done quite enough damage for one lifetime." To his quiet astonishment, she obeyed. The blade clattered to the carpet, and Caroline Shepherd buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook, but no sound came. 11 years of silence breaking all at once. Poirot waited. He had learned long ago that silence is often the best question. When she finally looked up, her mascara had run in two perfect black rivers. "You think I killed him," she whispered. "Everyone always thought that, even you. But I didn't poison my husband, and I didn't drive Roger to suicide. I loved him. God help me, I still love him." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Then tell me, what did happen that night? Leave nothing out. The little grey cells are hungry." She laughed, a broken sound, and began to pace the room, trailing her fingers across the dusty furniture as though greeting old ghosts. "It started with the letters," she said. "Not blackmail letters, love letters. My husband Ashley Faraz found them after he came back from the sanatorium. He was supposed to be dying, but the doctors were wrong. He lived, and he found Roger's letters hidden in my jewel case. He said nothing at first, just watched me with those terrible knowing eyes." Poirot nodded slowly. "And then?" "Then he began to drink laudanum again, more than before. He told me he would expose us both unless I ended it with Roger. I begged Roger to stop writing, to stop coming to the house. But Roger was proud. He said he would rather die than live without me. I thought it was just talk. Lovers say such things." She stopped at the window, staring out at the rain lashing the glass. "One night, Ashley confronted Roger, here, in this very room. I was in the garden, listening through the open French window. I heard everything. Ashley told Roger he would go to the police with the letters unless Roger paid him £10,000. Roger laughed in his face, said he would see Ashley in hell first. Then Ashley said something worse. He said, 'I want you to know Caroline is carrying your child, and I will make certain the world knows it too.'" Poirot drew in a sharp breath. This was new. This changed everything. Caroline turned back to him, tears shining. Roger went white. He told Ashley to get out. Ashley smiled, that terrible cold smile, and said he would give Roger 1 week to decide. Pay or be ruined. Then he left. I came in through the window. Roger was shaking. He kept saying over and over, "What have we done? What have we done?" I tried to calm him. I said we would leave together, go abroad, start again. But he pushed me away. He said the scandal would destroy his nephew Ralph, his sister Flora. He couldn't bear it. He opened the drawer, took out the dagger, and— She could not finish. Poirot finished for her. "And you took the blade from his hand." "No." She shook her head violently. "He had already done it. He fell forward across the desk. I screamed. I pulled the dagger out, trying to stop the blood, but it was too late. He looked up at me and whispered, 'Tell them I did it myself. Tell them it was suicide because of the blackmail. Promise me, Caroline. Protect the child.' I promised. I burned the letters in the grate. I moved the chair to make it look as though he had been sitting, quietly, working. Then I left through the window and walked home through the village so people would see me." "Your child?" I asked softly. She placed both hands on her flat stomach. "There was no child. Ashley lied to hurt Roger more. But the lie worked. It killed him just the same." Poirot sat very still. "Then the blackmail letter you sent anonymously to Roger, that was also a lie." "I wrote it after he died. I wanted the police to believe it was suicide over blackmail. I thought if they believed that, no one would dig deeper. No one would discover the affair." "Your brother, Dr. Shepherd, he helped you?" "James knew everything. He found me in the garden covered in blood. He helped me stage the scene. He wrote the manuscript you read, the one that confessed his own guilt. He thought if he made himself the murderer and then killed himself, the case would stay closed forever. He loved me too, you see, in his quiet way.
We both sacrificed everything to protect a dead man's honor." Poirot rose slowly. "Then why bring me here now, after all these years? Why this elaborate charade?" "Because the real killer is still alive." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Ashley Ferrars didn't die of an overdose. I thought he did. We all did. But 3 months ago I received a letter posted from South America. The handwriting was his. He wrote that he had faked his death, sold everything, and vanished with a nurse from the sanatorium. He has come back to England. He knows I am living here, waiting. He wants the money Roger never paid, and he wants me dead for good this time. You, Poirot, are the only man alive who can stop him. That is why I brought you here, not to kill you, to save me."
Chapter 4. The Man Who Died Twice. The revolver gleamed steady in Ashley Ferrars' hand while 11 years of hatred burned in his eyes. Poirot did not flinch. He regarded the gun the way a chef regards an overcooked soufflé, with polite disappointment. "You are looking remarkably well for a corpse, Monsieur Ferrars. South America obviously agreed with you, though I confess the climate has done nothing for your manners." Ferrars smiled, the same thin, cruel smile Caroline had described. "Drop the act, Poirot. I've followed your career. All those neat little solutions, all that ridiculous vanity about the gray cells. Tonight, they won't help you." Caroline took one step forward. "Ashley, please. You've terrified me for the last time. Put the gun down." He swung the barrel toward her without looking. "One more word, darling, and I'll start with you. You've cost me 11 years and a fortune. Thanks to your lover's stubborn pride, I got nothing but ashes." Poirot raised one finger almost absently. "A small point of order, if I may. You say Mr. Ackroyd refused to pay, yet the estate was substantial. How exactly did you end up with nothing?" Ferrars laughed softly. "Because the fool changed his will the day before he died, left everything to his nephew Ralph on condition the boy never contacted Caroline again. I only discovered it 6 months ago, when I finally tracked down the new solicitor. By then the money was long gone, spent or tied up in trusts, all because of her." He jerked his head toward Caroline, who had gone very white. Poirot nodded as though this was the most reasonable explanation in the world. "And so you decided to come back from the dead, to punish the woman who rejected you, and to squeeze what you could from the only person still alive who knows the truth, namely myself?" "Exactly." Ferrars took one step closer. "You're going to write a full confession tonight, Poirot, that you made mistakes in the Ackroyd case, that Dr. Shepard was innocent, that Caroline and I planned it all. Then you will have a tragic accident with this revolver. A great detective overwhelmed with guilt. The newspapers will love it, and Caroline will pay me the $500,000 I deserve to keep the confession secret, or the world learns she drove one man to suicide and murdered another." Caroline whispered, "There is no $500,000, Ashley. I have nothing. The house is all I kept." "Then you'll find it. Borrow, sell your body in the street if necessary. I waited 11 years. I can wait a little longer." Poirot tilted his head, listening. Outside the storm had quieted. Only the ticking of the stopped clock broke the silence. No, that was not the clock. It was something else. A faint measured tread on the servants' staircase behind the paneling. Ferrars heard it too. His eyes flicked to the hidden door. "Who else is here?" "Only the ghosts you created, monsieur," Poirot said softly, "and one living man who never believed you were dead." The paneling swung open a second time. A tall figure stepped through carrying a service revolver, held with calm authority. Chief Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, older, thinner, but with the same bulldog expression Poirot remembered. "Drop it, Ferrars," Japp said conversationally. "I've been waiting outside for 20 minutes, long enough to hear everything."
Ferraz swung wildly between the two men. "You... how?" Poirot permitted himself a tiny smile. "When I received your telegram, I telephoned my old friend Jap. A message from a murdered man seemed exactly the kind of nonsense that required police attention. He has been watching the house since dusk. I merely kept you talking." Ferraz's face twisted. "You planned this?" "Naturally. One does not walk into an obvious trap without a small insurance policy." For a moment the room hung balanced on a thread. Then Ferraz made his choice. He lunged toward Caroline, seizing her by the throat and jamming the revolver against her temple. "Back off, both of you, or she dies right now." Caroline did not scream. She looked straight at Poirot with those extraordinary violet eyes and said very clearly, "Don't let him win, Hercule, not after everything." Jap raised his gun. "Let her go, Ferraz. You've nowhere to run." Ferraz began dragging Caroline backward toward the French windows. The rain had started again, lashing the glass like thrown gravel. Poirot took one precise step forward. "Monsieur Ferraz, you have forgotten something important." "And what is that?" "The dagger." Ferraz glanced down involuntarily. The dagger Caroline had dropped earlier lay on the carpet inches from Poirot's perfectly polished shoe. In that single heartbeat of distraction, Caroline drove her elbow hard into Ferraz's ribs, twisted free and threw herself sideways. Two guns roared at once. Ferraz spun, clutched his shoulder and crashed through the French windows into the storm-soaked night. Glass shattered like ice. By the time Jap and Poirot reached the balcony, Ferraz had vanished into the darkness of the overgrown garden. Jap swore colorfully. "He's wounded, won't get far." Poirot stared out into the rain. Perhaps, perhaps not. Some men are very hard to kill a second time. Caroline joined them at the broken window, her throat already bruising but her voice steady. "He won't stop, you know that." Poirot turned to her. "Then neither shall we, madame. The game, as your forged letter said, is not ended. It has only moved to a larger board." Far below, in the wet darkness, something moved between the ruined rosebeds, a limping figure, heading for the woods. Poirot watched until it disappeared. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "tomorrow we hunt a man who should have stayed dead."
Chapter 5. The Hunt Begins at Dawn. A blood trail led from the shattered window into the night, but the rain was already washing it away. Dawn came cold and gray over King's Abbot. The storm had spent itself, leaving the world clean and sharp like the edge of a knife. Hercule Poirot stood on the terrace of Stonegates Manor, wrapped in his enormous fur coat, sipping thick black coffee from a thermos that George had thoughtfully provided. Chief Inspector Jap was organizing a dozen local constables with dogs, while Caroline Shepherd sat on the stone balustrade, wrapped in a blanket, her bruised throat hidden beneath a silk scarf. Poirot watched the bloodhounds casting about the rose garden, their breath steaming in the frosty air. Ferraz had perhaps 6 hours' start and a wounded shoulder, but the man was cunning. He would not run blindly. He would circle back, double on his tracks, seek transport or a hiding place. Men like Ashley Ferraz always had contingency plans. Jap approached, wiping mud from his boots. "The trial goes cold at the old boathouse by the river. Looks like he launched the rowing boat there. We've telephoned downriver to warn the locks, but in this fog he could be anywhere." Poirot nodded absently, his eyes fixed on something half buried in the mud beneath a thorny bush. He knelt carefully and, with a silk handkerchief, extracted a small gold cigarette case. It was engraved with the initials A.F., and still held 3 damp Turkish cigarettes. "One more thing, Monsieur l'Inspecteur. Our ghost smokes the same brand as the late Roger Ackroyd. A sentimental touch, perhaps, or deliberate cruelty. Caroline came to stand beside him. Ashley always hated that Roger smoked better cigarettes than he could afford. He stole that case from Roger's desk the night he confronted him. He kept it all these years like a trophy. Poirot turned the case in his gloved fingers. Then we know what he values: pride, revenge, and money. He will not leave England without settling all 3 scores. Japp scratched his head. So where do we look? He's wounded, needs a doctor or bandages at the least. Can't exactly walk into a hospital. No, Poirot said thoughtfully, but there is one person in this village who owes him a debt. One person who helped him fake his death 11 years ago. The nurse from the sanatorium, Miss Russell. Caroline went very still. You think she came back with him? I think love and greed are powerful motivators, madame, and Miss Russell was always ambitious. Come, we will pay a call upon the lady before the police frighten her into silence. The 3 of them drove in Japp's official car through the waking village. Children on their way to school stared at the little Belgian with the enormous mustache. Old men touched their caps, remembering the famous murder. At the far end of the high street stood Fernley Cottage, a pretty house with lavender shutters, where Miss Russell had taken lodgings after returning from abroad 6 months earlier. Poirot knocked with his cane. The door opened almost immediately. Miss Russell was no longer the pretty young nurse of 11 years ago. Time and tropical sun had weathered her face, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She looked from Poirot to Caroline to Japp, and smiled without warmth. I wondered how long it would take you. Come in, then. The kettle's just boiled. They followed her into a neat parlor that smelled of antiseptic and dried flowers. On the table lay a pile of fresh bandages and a bottle of iodine. Beside them rested a man's blood-stained shirt. Poirot raised an eyebrow. You have a patient, mademoiselle? Ashley was here, she said flatly. He left an hour ago. Took my car. Said if I helped him one last time, he'd give me £10,000 once he reached the continent. I told him I'd think about it while I bandaged his shoulder. Then I put enough morphia in his tea to drop a horse. Japp stepped forward. You drugged him? Where is he now? Upstairs, tied to the bed and snoring like a pig. I decided 11 years of waiting was enough. The police can have him, but only after I've had my say. She led them up the narrow staircase to a small back room. Ashley Ferrars lay sprawled across the covers, his shoulder crudely bandaged, his face gray with exhaustion and drugs. His wrists and ankles were bound with silk stockings. Poirot stared down at him for a long moment. All this, he whispered, all the lies, the deaths, the fear, for money. Ferrars stirred groggily. His eyes focused on Poirot, and pure hatred blazed through the drug-lees. You, he croaked, always you. Poirot regarded him with clinical detachment. You made one fatal mistake, monsieur. You believed that because you deceived the world once, you could do so again. But the world has a long memory, and Hercule Poirot has an even longer one. Japp began reading Ferrars his rights, while 2 constables lifted the prisoner between them. As they carried him down the stairs, Ferrars managed one last venomous look at Caroline. This isn't over. he rasped. "I'll see you hang yet." Caroline did not answer. She simply closed the bedroom door behind her, as though shutting away 11 years of nightmares. In the parlor, Poirot accepted a cup of tea from Miss Russell. "You have acted wisely, mademoiselle, though I suspect your motives were not entirely altruistic." She smiled thinly. £10,000 is a great deal of money, Monsieur Poirot, but a clear conscience is worth more. Besides, I always hated the bastard. Outside, the village was coming alive to the news. The ghost had been caught. The murder that shook King's Abbot twice had finally ended. But Poirot stood on the cottage steps, turning the gold cigarette case in his fingers. Something still troubled him, something small and neat and terribly wrong. Japp joined him, lighting his pipe. "Well, that's that. Attempted murder, extortion, impersonating a corpse. He'll hang for this one." "Perhaps," Poirot said quietly. "And yet, why did he return now, after 11 safe years? What changed 6 months ago?" Caroline came to stand beside him. "The new will. He said he discovered Roger's changed will." "Exactly." Poirot snapped the case shut. "But Roger Ackroyd changed his will the day he died. How could Ferrars learn of it from South America? Someone here must have written to him. Someone who knew about the new will. Someone who wanted Ferrars to return." He turned slowly, looking back at the cottage. Miss Russell was watching from the window, her face suddenly pale. "Ah," Poirot said softly, "it seems our story is not quite finished after all. There is still one more truth buried in a lie, and Hercule Poirot will dig until he finds it."
Chapter 6. The Nurse's Secret. Miss Russell's smile vanished the instant Poirot's gaze fixed upon her. The little parlor suddenly felt very small. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, yet inside Fernley Cottage, the air grew colder than the grave. Miss Russell backed against the lace curtains, her weathered hands fluttering like trapped birds. "You knew," he said softly. "You have always known." She tried to laugh. "I told you I drugged him. I gave him to the police. What more do you want from me?" "The truth, mademoiselle, all of it this time. No more pretty stories about clear consciences and sudden attacks of virtue." Japp shifted his weight, ready to arrest her on the spot, but Poirot lifted one gloved finger. "Patience, mon ami. Let the lady speak. She has carried this weight for 11 years. Another few minutes will not matter." Miss Russell looked from face to face. Caroline's, pale and unforgiving. Japp's, hard as English oak. Poirot's, calm, terrible. Then her shoulders sagged, and 11 years of secrets poured out like poison from an old wound. "It was my idea," she began, "all of it. When Ashley Ferrars lay dying of that wasting sickness in the sanatorium, he promised me marriage, money, everything if I saved him. The doctors had given him weeks. So I switched the medicines, gave him the new serum from America that wasn't licensed yet. It worked. He lived, but the fool fell in love with Caroline instead. He used me, then cast me aside like a soiled uniform." Caroline made a small sound, but did not speak. "I hated them both," Miss Russell continued, her voice steady now. "When Ashley discovered the affair, he came to me raging, said he would ruin them both. I saw my chance. I told him to fake his own death. I increased the laudanum dose until everyone believed he had overdosed in his sleep. We buried a weighted coffin. He sailed to South America the same week, and I waited.
He promised when he returned wealthy, we would marry. 11 years I waited. Letters at first, then nothing. Poirot nodded. And 6 months ago? 6 months ago I received a cable. Ashley was coming back. He had heard rumors Roger Ackroyd changed his will on the day he died, left everything to young Ralph. Ashley was furious. All those years hiding for nothing. He ordered me to prepare the house, to lure you here. He wanted revenge on Caroline and on you for solving the case so neatly. He said if you confessed to mistakes, the world would believe anything. Poirot turned the gold cigarette case over in his hands. And the telegram, signed Roger Ackroyd, your work? I taught myself his handwriting from old prescription pads. I typed the messages on an old machine I kept from the sanatorium. Everything was ready. The rose, the letters, the photograph with the scratched face. Ashley thought it would terrify Caroline. It was supposed to look like a haunting. Caroline spoke for the first time, her voice raw. You let me believe a ghost had come back. You let me live in terror. I wanted you to suffer, Miss Russell said simply, the way I suffered watching the man I love you. Silence filled the room thick as dust. Poirot slipped the cigarette case into his pocket. You realize, mademoiselle, that you are guilty of at least 3 serious crimes: conspiracy to defraud, conspiracy to extort, and assisting a fugitive, not to mention the small matter of grave robbery. Miss Russell lifted her chin. Then arrest me. At least I will be warm in prison, and Ashley Ferrars will hang alone. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready, but Poirot stopped him again. One moment. There is still a detail that troubles me. He turned back to the nurse. The morphia you gave Ferrars this morning. A heavy dose, you said. Enough to drop a horse. She nodded proudly. He won't wake until tomorrow. Yet when the constables carried him downstairs, he was awake enough to threaten Madame Shepherd. His eyes were open, his words clear. A man dosed with that much morphia does not threaten. He sleeps the sleep of the dead. The nurse went very white. You gave him a harmless sedative, Poirot continued gently. Perhaps even a stimulant. The real Ashley Ferrars is not upstairs. He never was. You have been playing a double game. The nurse's hand flew to her throat. No! Yes, the man we captured is an accomplice, someone you hired to play the part while the real Ferrars completes his escape. That is why you were so calm, why you surrendered him so easily. You wished us to believe the story ended. Japp swore and thundered up the stairs. 2 constables followed. A moment later came the crash of an overturned bed and a shout. He's gone, cut the ropes and vanished out the back window. Miss Russell sank into a chair, all fight gone. Ashley planned everything. He said if the police came too soon, I was to give him a wounded man, a former patient from Argentina who looked enough like him, paid a fortune to take the risk. The real Ashley left before dawn. He has a seaplane waiting on the coast. By tonight, he will be in France. Poirot looked almost admiring, magnificent, a deception worthy of the great train robbers. But you, mademoiselle, have one chance to redeem yourself. Tell us where the seaplane waits. Help us catch him, and perhaps the judge will remember your cooperation. She stared at the floor for a long moment. Then she whispered a name. Crag Bay, the old smuggler's cove. 12 miles north, there's a dirt track from the old coast road. He will leave on the evening tide. Japp was already reaching for the telephone. Poirot bowed to the defeated nurse. You have chosen wisely, and now the hunt truly begins.
Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, turning the wet village to gold. But Poirot's eyes were fixed on the northern horizon. Somewhere beyond the hills, a man who refused to die was running for his life, and Hercule Poirot was running faster.
Chapter 7. The Tide at Crag Bay. The tires of Jap's Bentley screamed along the narrow coast road, while gulls wheeled overhead like white scraps of paper caught in the wind. By the time they reached the cliffs, the sun already hung low and red, bleeding into a sea the color of gunmetal. The dirt track Miss Russell had described plunged downward between blackthorn and gorse, ending at a shingle beach cupped by cruel rocks. Far below, a single-engine seaplane rocked at anchor, its silver wings catching the last light like a dragonfly poised for flight. A rubber dinghy was being hauled up onto the stones by two men. One of them, tall despite the slump of his wounded shoulder, unmistakably Ashley Ferrars. Jap killed the engine and reached for the police whistle, but Poirot laid a restraining hand on his arm. "Wait, mon ami. Observe. There are three men, not two. The pilot, the accomplice from the cottage, and Ferrars himself. They are nervous. They know time is short." Caroline, who had insisted on coming, stood beside them, the wind whipping her silver-threaded hair across her face. "Let me go down alone. He will not shoot me, not yet. He still wants the money he thinks I can raise." Poirot considered her for a long moment. "Very well, but you will wear this." He produced a tiny nickel-plated pistol from his overcoat pocket and pressed it into her hand. "A lady's gun, madame, but quite sufficient at close quarters." She slipped it into her coat pocket and started down the steep path without looking back. The three men on the beach saw her at once. Ferrars stepped forward, shading his eyes against the dying light. "Caroline," his voice carried clearly on the wind. "Come to say goodbye?" She kept walking until she stood no more than 10 yards from him. "I came to watch you leave, Ashley. Leave and never come back. Take your blood money and disappear. I will sign whatever you want, only end this." Ferrars laughed, the sound thin and savage. "You think I trust you now, after everything? No, darling. You are coming with me. Insurance. Once we are over the channel, you can wire your bankers. Then perhaps I let you swim home." He gestured, and the accomplice seized her arm, twisting it cruelly behind her back. The pilot was already scrambling aboard the seaplane, starting the engine with a cough and a roar. High on the cliff, Poirot turned to Jap. "Now." Jap blew 3 sharp blasts on his whistle. At the same moment, a dozen uniformed constables rose from the gorse, where they had lain hidden, rifles leveled. Police cars with bells clanging poured onto the track, blocking the only escape. The pilot killed the engine and raised his hands. The accomplice released Caroline and stepped back, pale as salt. Ferrars alone did not move. He stared up at the cliff face, at Poirot standing calm and immaculate against the sky. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached inside his coat. "Drop it, Ferrars," Jap shouted. "It is finished." Ferrars smiled. "Is it?" He drew out not a gun, but the gold cigarette case Poirot had pocketed earlier. He flipped it open, took out a Turkish cigarette, and lit it with a steady hand. "You always were too clever, Hercule, but some men prefer to choose their own ending." Before anyone could move, he put the barrel of a small derringer beneath his chin and pulled the trigger. The sound was astonishingly small against the crash of waves. Ashley Ferrars folded neatly onto the wet shingle, like a marionette with its strings cut. Caroline did not scream. She simply walked forward, knelt beside the body, and closed his eyes with 2 fingers. "It is done," she whispered. "Finally done." Poirot came down the path more slowly, his little shoes slipping on loose stones. When he reached the beach, he stood for a long time looking at the dead man, and the blood running pink into the foaming water. "A wasteful creature," he said at last. "He could have lived quietly in the sun with his nurse and his money, but no. He needed to come back to the place where he was hated. Pride, mon ami. Always pride." Jap organized the constables to carry the body up the cliff. The pilot and the accomplice were led away in handcuffs, muttering about reduced sentences. The seaplane rocked empty at its mooring, soon to be seized by customs. Caroline remained kneeling on the shingle long after everyone else had gone. Poirot offered her his arm. "Come, madame, the tide is turning. It is time to go home." She took his arm, and together they climbed the path as the first stars appeared cold and bright above the darkening sea. Behind them, the gulls wheeled and cried over something that had finally stopped moving.
Chapter 8. The Last Lie. The lights of King's Abbot twinkled below them like scattered diamonds as the police car carried them back through the night. 3 days later, Hercule Poirot sat in the familiar study of Stonegates Manor one final time. The broken French windows had been boarded up, the blood scrubbed from the carpet, and the dagger removed forever to Scotland Yard's Black Museum. Outside, autumn leaves fell in slow golden spirals, but inside a small coal fire crackled, and the air smelled of beeswax and hot chocolate. Caroline Shepherd no longer wore black. She had chosen a simple dove-gray dress that made her look younger than her years. Poirot placed his cup carefully on the saucer. "It is finished, madame. Ashley Ferrars is buried this time under his own name. Miss Rossell has made a full statement and will serve perhaps 3 years. The accomplice and the pilot have turned King's evidence. The newspapers call it the case of the man who died twice. They are already asking for my memoirs." Caroline smiled faintly. "And will you give them the true story?" "Some of it." The little Belgian permitted himself a twinkle. "A detective must keep a few secrets, or where is the mystery?" She rose and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet garden. "I have sold the house. Everything. I am going abroad. Italy, perhaps. Somewhere the sun shines and the past cannot find me. Before I go, there is something I must give you." She returned to the desk and opened a small leather jewel case. From it she took a single object wrapped in faded silk. When she unfolded the cloth, Poirot saw a miniature portrait in a gold frame, a young woman with violet eyes and raven hair, the face that had been scratched from the photograph. "This is the only picture of me Roger ever had. He carried it until the day he died. I want you to have it. You gave me back my life, Hercule Poirot. 11 years too late for Roger, but not too late for me." Poirot took the miniature with gentle fingers. "You honor me, madame, though I did very little. It was pride that killed Ashley Ferrars in the end. Pride and the inability to leave a story unfinished, much like a certain detective I know." She laughed,
Then the first real laugh he had heard from her. "Will you ever retire properly?" "One day, perhaps, when the little gray cells grow tired. But not yet. There are still too many truths buried in lies." A silence fell between them, comfortable as an old friendship. Outside, the church clock struck 4. Caroline gathered her gloves. "My train leaves at 5. Walk me to the gate." They went out together into the fading afternoon. The gravel crunched beneath their feet, and rooks called from the elms. At the rusted iron gates where the adventure had begun, Caroline stopped and offered her hand. "Goodbye, Monsieur Poirot. Thank you for seeing through all the lies to the woman beneath." He bowed over her hand with courtly grace. "Goodbye, madame. Live well. That is the best revenge." She walked away down the lane without looking back, her step light for the first time in 11 years. Poirot watched until she turned the corner and disappeared. Then he took the miniature from his pocket and studied the painted face. Something stirred in his memory, something small and neat and perfectly wrong. He slipped the portrait away and started back toward the village. George was waiting with the luggage at the station. London called and new cases. But first, one final visit. The churchyard of St. Mary's lay peaceful in the twilight. Poirot made his way between the leaning stones until he found the grave he sought. Dr. James Shepherd, beloved brother and physician, died 26. Beside it, a newer headstone. Roger Ackroyd, taken before his time. Poirot stood bareheaded in the cold. "My friends," he said softly, "you both tried so hard to protect her, with lies upon lies, but there was one lie too many." He reached into his overcoat and drew out not the miniature, but the original photograph, the one with the scratched face that he had kept from the study desk. Carefully, under the dying light, he held a match to the corner and watched the image curl and blacken. Because the woman in that photograph was not Caroline Shepherd at all. The height, the posture, the way she held her head, everything matched another woman entirely. The woman who had just said goodbye at the gate and boarded a train to freedom. Poirot dropped the burning fragments onto the gravel and ground them beneath his heel. "Some truths," he murmured, "are better left buried, even from the little gray cells." He turned and walked away through the gathering dusk. Behind him the wind stirred the dead leaves across 2 graves that held more secrets than bones. And Hercule Poirot, the greatest detective in the world, allowed himself the smallest, most human of smiles.
Chapter 9. The Woman Who Never Was. The train to London was unusually empty for a Friday evening, and Hercule Poirot had the first-class compartment entirely to himself. He sat very upright in the corner seat, his small hands folded upon his cane, staring at his reflection in the dark window. The neat mustache, the parted hair, the eyes that missed nothing, all exactly as the world expected. Yet tonight, those eyes were troubled. From his waistcoat pocket, he drew the miniature Caroline had given him only hours earlier. The painted violet eyes gazed back with gentle mockery. He turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "To my darling Roger, from his sea. Christmas, 1924. Poirot clicked his tongue in quiet exasperation. Mon Dieu, even the inscription lied. He reached into the opposite pocket and produced a second miniature, identical in size and frame. This one he had removed from Dr. Shepard's study 11 years ago during the original investigation. It had been hidden behind a row of medical books. The face was the same. The violet eyes, the raven hair, the tender half-smile. But the inscription on the back read, "To James, from his loving sister Caroline. Forever yours, C. 1898. Two miniatures, two different women, one face. Poirot wrapped both portraits in his silk handkerchief and returned them to his pocket. The puzzle that had begun with a telegram from a dead man was finally complete. And it was more terrible, more poignant than even he had imagined. Caroline Shepard had never existed. The real Caroline, born in 1878, had died at 17 of consumption in Switzerland. Dr. Shepard, grieving and half-mad with guilt for failing to save his only sister, had returned from the sanatorium with a young woman he introduced as Caroline, recovered. No one in the village had known the original Caroline well enough to question it. The new Caroline was an actress, down on her luck, whom Shepard had met in London. She agreed to the deception in exchange for security, a home, a name. Together they created the perfect sister, quiet, dutiful, devoted. But the actress, whose real name was Clara Fenton, had fallen deeply, truly in love with Roger Ackroyd, and Roger had loved her back with the helpless passion of a middle-aged man who believes himself beyond such things. When Ashley Ferrers threatened to expose the affair, he was not threatening to reveal adultery. He was threatening to reveal that Caroline Shepard was an impostor, that Dr. Shepard had committed fraud, grave fraud, that the woman Roger loved had no legal existence. Roger Ackroyd could not bear the scandal, not for himself, but for the woman he loved and for the brother who had saved her. So he took the only path that protected them both. He changed his will, leaving everything to his nephew. Then he staged his own suicide, making it look like blackmail had driven him to it. Dr. Shepard helped him. Clara held his hand as he died. Afterward, the doctor wrote his famous manuscript, confessing to a murder he never committed, a final act of love. He killed himself so that no one would ever question the story. Clara played the grieving, almost sister to perfection, and the world believed. Poirot closed his eyes. All the little details that had nagged at him for 11 years now fell into place. Why Caroline had no childhood friends in the village, why her accent occasionally slipped, why Dr. Shepard's devotion had bordered on the obsessive, why she had scratched her own face from the photograph, not in jealousy, but in terror that someone would recognize Clara Fenton, the third-rate actress who had vanished from the London stage in 1898. And why tonight she had given him the one portrait that could never be explained. A test, or perhaps a thank you, because Hercule Poirot had seen the truth and chosen to bury it again. The train slowed as it approached London. Poirot stood, gathered his belongings, and smoothed his mustache in the window's reflection. "Some lies," he said to the empty compartment, "are more humane than the truth." Roger Ackroyd died for love. Dr. Shepard died for love. And Clara Fenton, or Caroline Shepard, whichever name she chooses now, will live because of love. He stepped onto the platform at Paddington, where George waited with the Daimler. The fog was thick and yellow under the lamps. A perfect London night for secrets. As the car purred away into the traffic, Poirot allowed himself one small sigh. The case of the truth buried in a lie was closed. And this time, no telegram, no ghost, no plea from the grave would ever reopen it.
Chapter 10. The Truth Poirot Took to His Grave. Years later, in the quiet of his London flat, Hercule Poirot kept only one case file locked in the bottom drawer of his desk. It was unmarked, bound in plain black leather, and inside lay nothing but two miniature portraits, a single red silk rose pressed flat between tissue, and a sheet of heavy cream paper folded exactly as it had been that November night in 1936. On the evening of what would have been his 78th birthday, Poirot poured 2 glasses of tisane, set one on the table opposite his own chair as though expecting a guest, and finally opened the black file. He spoke aloud to the empty room, the way old men sometimes do when the little gray cells demand an audience. "You wish the whole truth, Miss Pa? Very well, here it is, complete for the first and last time. There never was a Caroline Shepherd. The real Caroline died in 1895, at the age of 17 in a Swiss sanatorium, clutching her brother's hand and begging him not to let her be forgotten. James Shepherd, brilliant, broken, and already half in love with the idea of devotion, could not bear it. He returned to England not with a sister, but with Clara Fenton, a 23-year-old actress whose violet eyes were the exact shade of Caroline's, whose height and coloring could pass under mourning veils and village gossip. Clara had been abandoned by a theatrical manager, penniless and desperate. James offered her a bargain: become Caroline Shepherd forever and never want again. She accepted. They rehearsed childhood stories until even they almost believed them. For 28 years the deception held perfectly. The village saw only a devoted brother and a quiet spinster who kept house for him. Then Roger Ackroyd fell in love with the woman he believed was Caroline, and everything began to unravel. Roger discovered the truth by accident, an old playbill in Clara's glove drawer. Instead of horror, he felt only tenderness. He loved her more because she had chosen to live a borrowed life for love of a dead girl. He proposed marriage, secretly, promising to take her away and give her a name that was truly hers at last. Clara accepted, trembling with hope she had never dared feel. Ashley Ferrars learned of the affair and saw his opportunity. He threatened exposure, not of adultery, but of fraud on a scale that would destroy Dr. Shepherd's practice, send Clara to prison for impersonation and perjury, and brand Roger a fool taken in by a common adventuress. Roger could not allow it. On the night we all remember, he rewrote his will, summoned Clara to the study, and asked her to help him die in a way that would silence Ashley forever. Dr. Shepherd supplied the drug, quick, painless, undetectable in those days. Clara held the dagger so that her fingerprints would be on it, then pressed Roger's hand around the handle after he was gone. Together, brother and actress staged the perfect suicide that was not quite suicide. James wrote his famous manuscript confessing to a murder he never committed, posted it to me, and took poison in his surgery so that no living soul could ever question Caroline's identity again. I solved the wrong crime. I found the murderer who wished to be found and allowed the real secret to remain buried. That has always been the great failure of Hercule Poirot. No, the great mercy. 11 years later, when Ashley Ferrars truly did fake his own death and fled to South America, Clara saw her chance to vanish properly. She staged the entire haunting, the telegram, the rose, the letters, knowing I would come, knowing I would see through the surface deception to the older one, and knowing, because she had studied me the way a condemned woman studies her judge, that I would choose silence again. She tested me with the miniature. I kept it. That was my answer.
Ashley Ferrars died on the shingle at Craig Bay, never understanding he was merely the final act in a play written long before he returned. Clara, Caroline, no, let us give her the name she earned, disappeared into Italy with the money from the sale of Stonegate's Manor, and has lived quietly ever since under yet another name, tending roses that are always red. And I have kept this secret for 30 years. I will take it with me when I go to join my old friends, because some truths are too fragile for the light, and some lies are the only tombstones the innocent will ever have. Poirot raised the second glass of tisane in a small salute to the empty chair. To you, madame, wherever you are, you fooled the world, you fooled Scotland Yard. For one brief moment, you almost fooled Hercule Poirot. Almost. He drank both cups, closed the black phial, and turned the key in the lock. Outside, London snow began to fall, soft and forgiving, covering every old grave with the same spotless lie. The end.